and welcome to the live series podcast brought to you by Amicus Recruitment. This is the podcast that gives you insight into the life and role of tech leaders from all over the world. Today, I'm joined by Sabine Kaiser, engineering manager over at Choco. Sabine, welcome. It's really good to have you on. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I'm good. I had a really relaxed morning, so.
Perfect. So since you've had such a relaxed morning, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of your role over at Choco and a little bit of background about the organisation itself too?
Yes, so I joined Choco, which is a Berlin-based startup, about 1.5 months ago as an engineering manager for the product catalog team. So what Choco does is the company has this overall vision of really making the whole food business, food industry more efficient and more sustainable. So the supply chain, the food supply chain is a very complex and also intransparent and inefficient system right now. So that you barely have any data. There's lots of manual steps in between, which create a lot of food waste in the end. So of course, also there's food waste on the consumer end, but most of it actually happens somewhere between producer and consumer. So that is the overall vision. And to get there, we really need to take like one step at a time. So what we do right now is we really looked at the whole supply chain, and so like thought, where can we solve a very specific problem for a certain user group to create a certain level of demand to then take this traction and apply it to other parts. And the problem that Choco sought out to solve is that the hospitality industry, which is like a big, like at this one end of the supply chain, really a big factor. So restaurants and hotels, for example, lots of the people that work there actually spend a ton of time ordering food, talking to their suppliers, comparing prices, and this is not why they're there, right? So they really want to create dishes, serve food, whatever. They don't want to spend hours on the phone or the fax machine even. So Toco provides a platform to really put all your orders there, connect to your suppliers, send messages to your suppliers, also then check your deliveries, etc., all on one platform. So that really saves them a ton of time. And by like tackling this one problem, we create then this demand as a like foundation to really then one step at a time make the whole supply chain more transparent and ultimately also more efficient, because then we will be able to really evaluate demand and supply levels in the end. And that's what we do. Exactly. And my role in the product catalog team. So this is basically a new team. We have all this data from the suppliers, what kind of products they offer. And now my task will be to really add a layer on top and really look on products more on a general level. So to really be able to measure demand and supply, not only for a specific supplier, but also overall, basically. So
yeah, it's super interesting. I know when we spoke a little bit before, I was so kind of enticed by the whole concept of Choco, and it kind of makes you wonder why it hasn't really been done before, really, because is it sort of, would you say it's kind of a tech for good sort of organization? Because it sounds like it's very sustainable and it's going to be cutting down on food waste as well, by the sounds of it, as well as kind of streamlining that process. So what was it that kind of attracted you professionally or personally to this kind of organization? Like, do you have like a background in sort of or a passion in sustainability, or just tell me a little bit about that?
So my academic background is actually in environmental planning. So doing my bachelor's, my master's program, sustainability, mitigating environmental impact, etc., always was like this huge topic. Then when I kind of looked into the software industry, and I felt like I really have this passion for engineering and for technical topics, and I really wanted to work in this industry. And at the same time, it kind of felt like I would kind of betray those ideals that I pursued by studying environmental planning. So when I then looked for job opportunities, that was always a huge factor for me to really bring this together, to have to work in a technical field, but really having a mission that really makes the world in overall more sustainable. Usually it's in one part only, but I mean, this is how it how it is, right? You can't change everything at once. So before Choco, I was in the mobility sector, really working on making like private mobility more sustainable by creating options to really pool people together. And then my last job was more on this like regional local development focus by providing better infrastructure for like people in more like rural regions. So yeah, there has always been this goal for me to really provide like an impact, basically. Yeah.
That's inspired. That's really cool. I know you just mentioned there, like your sort of, it's like that your team's kind of new. So you'll be looking to scale that presumably. How are you going to approach scaling the team at Choco? Do you kind of have, do you have an idea of kind of how you as a leader want to approach that, or does the sort of does the rest of the organization kind of, have they had a lot of input in that, or have you got kind of quite a bit of freedom to sort of take your own approach as a leader?
So yeah, the team, there will be some people from Choco that are already working on topics that affect the team, but most of them we will need to hire. So that is my priority right now, really looking at who will join our team, who do we want to join our team. So at Choco, we have those like core values, basically. The team is really the most important one. So of course, it's great to have someone on board who is technically very proficient, has a certain level of excellence and experience. But what I'm really looking at is how do they value collaboration? What kind of team spirit do they bring? So when they talk about their former achievements, how much does like the team's aspect play a role there? Do they take into account that often as a team, you create better results than on your own? So when we look for people, this is like the most important factor that I also am really like looking out for. So, and the next thing is really what's like the general mindset, and this is also that attracted me at Choco when I was in my interview process, and that you still feel every day that you're here. We really look out for people that bring on a certain like intrinsic motivation, a growth mindset, in a sense that they either actively seek to like develop themselves, or at least are always open for this challenge, right? So they really feel like people really want to progress themselves in a way, right? So this is something that we look out for, because it's really something that you also feel in the team spirit in a way. But when whoever you work with at Choco, you really feel like they bring in this motivation, they really take on those challenges and this ownership also. So we really put a value on this quite a bit. I think what this is often confused with and is this topic of cultural fit. So I really try to avoid mixing up this mindset topic with does this person have similar hobbies? Do they have a similar background or something like this? Because this is really not what this is about, right? So of course it's nice to have people on your team that also like, I don't know, hiking or whatever. Yeah. But I really try to not put an emphasis on this so much in the interview process, because it can create this weird bias that you don't want, and then create very uniform teams that we don't really, that would mean you would exclude so many people because of this. And yeah, so this is really what I personally also try to avoid a lot in the process, to bring in this bias, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you say that, you know, I think cultural fit, people do tend to instantly assume that means have similar hobbies, be interested in the same things outside of work, because that'll help the flow of the conversation in the office, presumably. But I suppose, yeah, the reality of that is from kind of a curator's perspective, that's kind of just going to create cliques and it excludes almost potential sort of really successful members of the team. So it's a really good stance to take on it, to be honest. So since we're talking about hiring processes, and I know when we spoke before, you said that you've got, is it two boys? Is it
Two boys, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So something that I've not really touched on before that I'm quite interested in kind of talking about is going through a hiring process in tech when you've got all these things. You've got tech specs, sorry, tech tests, generally we see a lot of different varied sort of hiring processes, and some of them can be up to sort of 5, 6, even 7 stages sometimes. So what I'm quite interested in knowing, Sabine, is would you tell me a little bit about your experiences in being hired in tech as a mum, and how, or if it's affected kind of well, if it's affected your career in any way really, or if it's benefited it, or just give us a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, so yeah, as you said, so I have 2 kids and they're 2 and 5, so it's still relatively small. And at the same time, 5, so the eldest is 5, so I've been in the industry now for 7 years, so most of the time I've actually also been a mom in the industry. And I think most of the time it's actually not a huge issue as long as you have a company that generally supports this in a way.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to hiring processes, or also in general, if the expectation is that you like take a lot of work on you for the process to progress in the process in your free time, it usually means I can't pursue this process anymore. Then I usually need to drop out if there's a challenge in there, like a technical one that will take me like 5 evenings a week or something. Then it's just, that is definitely not feasible. Then it's just like a no for me. And in the hiring processes I had last, it's always been also for me this, do I put in my CV that I have kids so that the company just knows that if I want this or not. I've usually left it out though for now to kind of just assess myself if it's feasible or not. But like even having to ask myself this question always felt weird, right? So that it could be such a like a blocker, maybe also for some companies, that you would leave this part out, even though it does have like does affect your CV also in a way, right? So yeah, and yeah, that all has also impacted me as a hiring manager. So when we look at hiring processes, I always bring in this perspective: what do we expect from people? Like, let's say you have 5 interviews in a process, which I think is today, especially for leadership roles, relatively normal. That already means that people need to take those 5 interviews outside of the working hours. Now, if we add on top a challenge that takes them, let's say, 5, 6, 7 hours, that will just not be feasible for people that don't just work, but really have those additional responsibilities. So
yeah, I suppose as well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if companies, like you were saying, it can act as a two-way street, really. If you're not convinced that a company is going to be flexible with you, then it's kind of that excludes them for you as well, and it's not necessarily always the other way around of you facing limitations being a mom.
Very much, yes, very much.
How do you think companies should approach that, or is there anything that sort of hiring leaders could do, or hiring managers could do to expose their sort of flexibility, or like just because what would you want to see if you were sort of thinking about applying for a role at a company? What sort of things would you want to see in order for you to be convinced that they're going to be kind of flexible, or is it something that comes up during the hiring process, or is there anything at the surface level that kind of shows that?
I think very often companies kind of go with a generic process, especially when it comes to like technical challenges, and then you should really evaluate how much value do you get out of this task, right? What does it actually tell you about the person? Does it tell you what you need to know to hire them? And very often, like on this technical level, because you also don't know like if someone really spent 12 hours on this or 2, right? So because and this can so how much does it really tell you about the capabilities of a person? So are there other ways to do this in maybe an interactive session, to just look at the code base here, how they evaluate this, how they would make changes to this, how they would approach this? So so maybe you can get the same kind of information out of this, like as if you would give them a task and then they talk about that, and you don't even know if what they tell you is what actually happened, because you don't know how much time they actually spent on this and could spend on this. So.
Yeah, so less results driven, more kind of looking at the process of how someone's going to go through that task instead of just seeing what the result is instead.
And,
yeah,
and really ask yourself, what is your goal of this, and what do you want to assess in this stage of the process, right? So what and what ways are there to make this assessment? And I think getting a code challenge and solving this at home is just one way to do this. So there are others out there.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's a subject that comes up all the time in our office, you know, because we're talking about different hiring processes all the time. And sometimes, you do get kind of someone who's going for maybe 2 or 3 roles, and they've got kind of, that means they've got 3 sort of 4 or 5 hour tech tests to do.
Exactly.
And they've got like kind of a week to do it. So, you know, they're kind of rushing to get the results, and not going through a process that they would necessarily do if they were actually in the role whatsoever, because they're just trying to get the job done, just to progress to the next stage. So it is an interesting topic, actually. It's something that that I think is probably going to come up more and more as people are valuing the free time a little bit more, and the work-life balance is shifting a little bit. So so with that in mind, then how do you stay motivated? Do you ever kind of get drops in motivation or anything when you're at work? Or because I know you've kind of, it must be quite full on for you at the moment with having a small team at the moment that is in the midst of growing. Do you get kind of I don't really know how to phrase it, but do you get like kind of drops in motivation, or is there kind of any days where you sort of think, I'm just not feeling it today? Like, how do you kind of like keep pushing through that?
It's actually a topic that I just had, because it's true. And usually as a manager, you have just this full calendar and you're overwhelmed with all the tasks that you have. And right now I just joined. So the first weeks were basically onboarding, getting to know everything. Now I'm at the stage where I feel like I have a good overview on what we do, how we do it, who does what. But at the same time, the team is not yet there to really take off and to really take over tasks. So that means for me now really asking for initiatives, ongoing ones that I can contribute them to, finding those out myself. But it's not easy every day. That is true. So how do I do this? I usually kind of just, there are tasks that I definitely have that are just there, but I can, like, hiring is my biggest priority right now, and we work with hiring pools. So we look for positions and then see to which team does that person fit. So what I'm currently doing is just really taking part in more of those hiring processes, and by this also taking like some work of the other people that have more tasks right now, right? So and that is like the biggest priority right now. At the same time, we have a lot of ongoing initiatives in the technical field, and are currently kind of working on how to streamline the processes around this. So I'm looking into this, so it really helps me get a better understanding of the technical setup of the whole organization, and at the same time driving forward those initiatives that ultimately pay into the yearly goals of the company. So that is what I actively do, and where I really try to connect with the program managers and the other engineering managers to also build those relationships in the end, right? So
it does sound very full on, like, and so I imagine it's pretty easy to feel motivated when you've got so much to kind of look forward to, and you've got the bigger picture on things as well now. So that's exciting. Like I quite like I think when I first started at Amicus as well, like that kind of initial excitement of starting a new job, and then you kind of feel like you kind of have a little breakthrough of finally, right, I've got my feet under the table a little bit now. I feel like I can start to move forward with things, and you get that is a super kind of motivated time, isn't it? So when let's just divert a little bit. When you're sort of, when you've got your team in the future, and we talked about cultures and kind of keeping the balance in between those cultures, and you made a really good point of saying that it's not about the individuals, it's about kind of making them blend professionally. So how kind of how would you approach kind of not necessarily conflict, far from, if anything, but more sort of how are you going to make sure that people are heard? I think it was a subject that we spoke about in our office recently of how do you kind of make sure that people are bringing their ideas forward? How do you, because I know that especially sort of in tech and developers, some people can be quite extroverted, but a lot of the time, some team members can tend to be a little bit more introverted and kind of like to go into their own space and put the headphones on or whatever, and they'll just kind of do their own thing. So, how is it as a leader? Like, how would you approach making sure that everybody is equally kind of heard within the team and is contributing equally within the team? And yeah, is that a priority for you as well as a leader?
Yeah, it's definitely a priority, because I do think it's really necessary for like a healthy, robust team to be able to address problems that they have, not only like on this when they like in the lunch break maybe, but also in like, for example, a retrospective or something. So I've seen it happen a lot, that retrospective were done very superficially, right? So some problems were brought up, but really the deep ones weren't tackled. And so one factor that's important is kind of a sustainable growth for the team, right? So really, if you add too fast, too many people, you can't really create this connection between the team members. I do see that I, as a manager, like, I'm the first one really to create, first of all, this like connection between me and the people themselves, so that we really create this understanding, like this mutual understanding, that we know what do I expect of them, what do they expect of me. Really have regular talks that are not so much status driven. So like, what have you been doing? What are you doing now? But really look more into what keeps you, like the question you just asked, right? What keeps you motivated? What blocks you right now? How can I unblock you? And then by understanding better how everyone likes to work, what everyone's kind of preferences and communication styles are, then because it can be that you just have very strong communicators on the team, and I think it's a relatively easy one, because they will usually bring up the topics by themselves. But if you have this mix of more introverted people, people that are maybe a bit intimidated, maybe very new to the industry, then I feel like it often makes a huge impact if you change certain patterns. So maybe you have those like your rituals always in the same way. Really see how can we change this in a way that makes it easier for others to talk. Yeah, I then really look on a situation based approach for the ones. Maybe you don't have an issue with stand-ups, but maybe you have an issue with retrospectives or plannings. How can you shake this up? Something I've done in the past that was also very interesting is we did like a personal goals and values workshop in a way. So we were the people already knew themselves a bit, but there were also new people on the team. So it followed an approach, I don't no longer have it in mind, but where you kind of pick like, what are your personal values, what is like most important to you. On a professional side, do you kind of know where you want to go? Do you have goals? And then kind of just talk about this in the team. And it was really good it was also surprising in some ways, but it really helped people to connect and to understand each other better. So that was one thing. And then what we do also is we tried what I've done in the past, we tried to find team events that take into account different preferences, right? So so maybe karaoke is not something that you would do with a team full of introverts, right? But there are so many other things, and it often really brought the people together in a good way. So of course now during COVID times it wasn't possible so much. So it was really I really felt this. It made it a lot harder to create this like baseline, this foundation for a good team. And still looking to how can you make those hybrid approaches, with some people being remote, some people maybe being in the office work so that you still create this team feeling. That's actually one of the biggest challenges I see right now, as especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the major points.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and COVID always comes up kind of in, I think, probably every episode, because it is so, I mean, we don't need to go into the impact that it's had, but it's more the thing that always comes up is creating the balance between teams when half of the team are working kind of remotely, like, you know, how is that something that you're planning on kind of attacking when you've kind of grown your team? Are you gonna, what's Choco's kind of approach to it? Are you gonna have kind of a bit of a hybrid model? Are you gonna what's kind of the plan of action with that? Of interest.
It's actually the biggest topic right now, because hiring, just hiring locally is not really sufficient right now in the industry, at least in Berlin. So we have offices globally, basically, so especially in Europe, but also in the US. And so we are already, like, the general setup is in a hybrid way, because of course you also need to include the other teams in the other offices. Most of the engineering organization is Berlin based though. And now we're currently looking at how can we grow the hiring pool, provide flexibility, but also make sure that people connect on this personal basis. And so far, being in the office always played a big role in this, and it probably will also in the future. So we need to find a good way to enable people to come here, while still having this feeling of flexibility, and also being able to hire, like, outside of Berlin, basically. So I myself don't live in Berlin. I commute twice a week to the office by train, which works pretty well also for me, for Choco. But yeah, this is actually like an ongoing discussion right now. So
yeah,
we are also like looking at how do other companies solve this, because we really want to maintain this team feeling, which we have also with all the other connected teams. But for me, seeing my team members a few times a month at least always really creates a very different feeling than just being remote. So
yeah, it is interesting to see how different companies approach it, and I suppose industry does play a part a little bit, but at the same time, I think everybody kind of wants the same thing, and that work-life balance, like we mentioned earlier, is so it's so pivotal now in making a role look attractive to potential candidates, and it's something that everybody's kind of looking for. So it is super important. So I'll be excited to see how that pans out for Choco. So what sort of, I'm just going to sort of round it off really with a question that I sort of ask everybody really, but what sort of advice would you have for kind of people aspiring to be in a similar position to you?
So, so I'm currently an engineering manager at the team, which means I'm responsible for setting the team goals, the people management, and also representing the team towards the company, and vice versa, so representing the company goals towards the team. And I think the first question should be, is this what you want? So do you really want to pursue this management path? And if you do, I feel like there's lots of opportunities just to kind of try it out, step in when on vacation or parental leave, and be like, hey, I want to see if it's for me, because especially in engineering, I feel like many people after a while say it's actually not for me. I missed the technical contribution. I really want to go to more technical track. So if you're not sure, there's often opportunities to try it out. Hopefully you have a manager on your own to bring this up. If you don't, if your company is not set up this way, I do think it's possible to kind of take on over those responsibility and kind of just really grow into this role if it does not exist in your career plan. If you don't come from engineering, I've often seen now companies looking for engineering managers and not asking for a technical background, which I find very interesting. So you don't need to come from like a hands-on career path to get into this role. Still, you do, I would say, do require a certain like technical understanding and knowledge of the industry. So that would be something, this mix out of communication skills and people skills, but also knowing how software development works. You don't need to necessarily be a programmer to become an engineering manager, but you should have an understanding of what how the industry works, what the biggest topics are there right now, and how like the software development process looks like. So then you can get into this role without having ever written any code, which I also found very interesting when I looked at jobs lately. So yeah,
I think so taking an interest essentially in, you know, even if you haven't ever written code, taking an interest in kind of, because essentially it's your team are going to want to feel some sort of, you need some kind of bridge right into what they're doing every day, and yeah, like you said, if you're going to be hands-on, you're going to need a little bit of something. Well, listen, Sabine, it's been absolutely amazing having you on. I feel like we could have just carried on talking about various things, but maybe we'll get you on again in the future. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can hover over the logo in the corner and hit subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok for updates. Head to our website, amicusjobs.com, for tech news, webinars, blogs, and keep up to date on all the latest Python, Golang, and JavaScript roles around the globe. Sabine, thanks again so much. It's been really insightful. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you.
All right. Take care.